In today's video, we're going to look at the latest API for the Mac, and in particular the capabilities that have now been added to CubicSDR. One of the things that's been added is the ability to control the RSPdx. The second thing is to enhance the capabilities of the RSPduo, and then thirdly, it's also compatible with running SOAPy remote on a Pi server somewhere else on your network. First up, we want to go to the downloads page at SDRplay.com. You can get there by using the top navigation. Then on the software page on the left, click on the tab for Mac, and you will see that we have both the API v2.13 and CubicSDR 0.2.5, which are still the latest release versions for the RSP1, the 1A, the RSPduo, and the RSPduo, but supporting single tuner only mode. If you have an RSP1 or a 1A or an RSPduo or an RSPduo Pro, that's probably still the best version to use. If we go down still further, we see the API version 3.07 and CubicSDR 0.2.6, and what you need to do is download the API and the corresponding version of Cubic. They're kind of like a match pair. So 3.07 requires Cubic 0.2.6 and the previous API requires Cubic 0.2.5. So you can download and install both of those, and then we'll put them to the test. I did an RSPdx to my Mac, and just for demonstration purposes I have a short telescopic antenna on antenna C and a very short wire antenna on antenna A. So let's start up Cubic and see what happens. So as expected, as soon as you start it up, the RSPdx is detected. There's a serial number right there, and you have a few other parameters you can select. For example, sample rate. I've already got it set up for the maximum 10 megahertz. And we've got by default antenna A, so we can just click on start and we can see what's going on here. And for example, let's go to the FM broadcast band. So I'll put in about 100 megahertz, which should put us in the middle of the band. Be FM stereo, and let's just pick a station. There's one right there. So as you can see, there's the fairly active FM band. I'll just turn down the rate of updates there. It tends to drive you crazy. And basically that's it. You can also within the program itself select the different antenna. Antenna C should probably show about the same. Yeah, about the same. The AGC compensated for it. And talking of AGC, I normally leave AGC turned on. If you turn it off, you get manual selections of both IF gain and RF gain, and notice these are IFGR and RFGR, so they're actually gain reduction sliders. So the lower the slider goes, the higher the gain. And if you go too low, then you will end up overloading the input and distorting the sound. So normally I prefer to just leave it on AGC turned on. In the same settings menu, you can select whichever antenna you want, as we already illustrated. And that's really all there is to using Cubic. It's basically the same interface that you've seen before. Very nice basic setup, very easy to set up and use, and it does feature rig control, so it's rather nice to use for setting up a pan adapter, and it uses hamlib, and there's a lot of different radios available that you can control. So if you've got a Mac handy and you want to set up a quick pan adapter, this would be a nice way to go. I wanted to show you one other tip while we're here, which may be difficult to demonstrate, but we'll give it a go anyway. I'm going to go up into the air band, so I'm going to put a space on there, and I got to around about 124 megahertz. And let's see if there's anything showing. The signals here tend to be somewhat sporadic. There's one right there. Let's go to AM. We might pick up something. And the problem is when you're listening to airband, you're constantly chasing the signals, because they're very fleeting in nature. So one thing you can do is just sit on a frequency that seems to be often used and just wait to hear a broadcast. Now what you want to do is set a squelch level so that you're not listening to noise all the time. And unfortunately there's not much activity going on, but there's one rather nice feature when you're monitoring airband in Cubic. For example, we earlier saw activity around about 126 megahertz. Here's another signal up here at 127. If I hold the shift key and click on it, now I've actually got two modems, as they call them in Cubic. So I have one monitoring 126.01 and another one on 127.09. Whichever one I click on down here will appear up here in the secondary spectrum window, and I can set a squelch level for it so that when they're not broadcasting you don't hear anything. So what you can do is you can go across the band. There's a nice strong signal there, and you can shift click on as many different frequencies as you want and set an appropriate squelch level for each, and then when there's actually a broadcast comes on, it will break squelch and you'll hear the communication that's going on. Unfortunately, as I say, there's not much activity going on right now, but this is rather a unique feature in Cubic. To continue the ATC discussions, if you have a number of frequencies that are commonly used in your area, approach control for example, perhaps a local tower, you can select all these, and then you can go to the file menu and you can save this as a session, and that way you can recall these frequencies for use later on. And back in the days when we still had a lot of air activity going on, I did record a session, and this was rather interesting. It records saves it as an XML file, and here you can see I think I racked up about 20 different ATC frequencies that were commonly in use around here. And you heard someone breaking through the squelch there. What you will want to do is have a way to I'm just going to stop this for a moment. What you will want to do when you've got a lot of frequencies like this is you have to step through them individually and make sure you set an appropriate squelch level, or you get a lot of noise coming through, as I saw right there. But it is very handy if you want to monitor multiple frequencies at once. So with that, I'll shut this one down and I'll come back and we'll look at the RSPduo. I've now reconfigured my setup and I've plugged in an RSPduo. So once again, let's open up Cubic. Now you may notice something interesting on the SDR devices screen. Instead of having one entry for the Duo, we actually have 4. You might have expected 2, considering it's a dual tuner device, so let's explain what's going on here. The first setting, if you've used the Duo with SDRuno, will be familiar. It's basically single tuner mode, in which case the Duo acts as a single device with a choice of 3 inputs, and any one of those inputs can sample up to 10 megahertz of bandwidth at a time. The second item is dual tuner, and that is corresponds to the diversity tune mode in SDRuno. And what happens here is both tuners are used and output a data stream, which is then processed, 2 data streams, one from each tuner, to do the diversity tuning calculations. Now, although SOAPy SDR and the API support the diversity mode, there is no native Mac software at this time that is capable of doing anything with it. So although it's available for future use, Cubic would need to be rewritten to be able to handle 2 separate data streams and do the diversity tuning calculations. The third line item here is the master mode, and again, if you've used the Duo with SDRuno, you'll be familiar with this. Basically, this is setting up the first tuner, which can sample up to 2 megahertz of bandwidth, and it becomes the master. And in similar vein, the fourth item here is just a special case. It's the same as the master mode above, except the sample rate is set to 8 megahertz, and it's been designed to be used in conjunction with dump 1090 running on the second tuner. So let's start this thing up in single tuner mode first, just to show you what's going on there. So once again, we're looking at the air band. Let's go down to the FM broadcast band. It'll be a bit more active for us. And sure enough, here you see some stations. We can go to FM stereo. I'll turn on the AGC. Turn down the volume a little bit, and for this frequency range, probably 10 megahertz of bandwidth would be good, so we can see more stations across the band. So I'll mute that out, you know, that is how you would expect the Duo to work in single tuner mode. You get the choice of which of the three inputs you wish to select, and I'm on tuner 150 ohm, that's a short wire antenna. I also on tuner 2, which is just a short telescopic antenna, so pretty much the same thing. So let's stop this in single tuner mode, and let's go look at the master slave mode. So what I'll do is I will start and stop the device. I will open up the SDR devices screen, and again we get those four choices. Only this time I'm going to select master. Okay, so we'll start this, and sure enough, there's our FM stations again. We should be able to hear them. So I'm going to turn the AGC back on again, so I don't have to mess with it. And this in master mode, the maximum sample rate we should be able to get is 2 megahertz, and that's correct. So what we want to do now is we want to open up the second tuner, and the way to do that again is analogous to SDRuno. We want to open up a second instance of CubicSDR, but there's a problem here. When you're on the Mac, if I go down and try and open up Cubic again, it won't, because the Mac says no, dummy, the Cubic's already running. So what you have to do is you have to go to a terminal window, and I've done this previously, and put in this command: open -n applications CubicSDR.app. That's the location of the CubicSDR app, and if we then hit return, what will happen is we get a second instance of Cubic will open up. Only this time the only choice we get now, remember the first tuner we've got set up as the master, and now we have the option to open up a slave. So we can start that, and there's the first one still going on behind it. Let's go down to about Let's go down to the AM broadcast band and see what we can see. AM, and sure enough, there'll be probably KRLD down here, and you can hear that. So what we've got going now is we're in master slave mode, and we have two instances of Cubic running. Let's get the terminal window out of the way. And the first one, as you can see, is on the FM broadcast band, and the second instance is down on the AM broadcast band. So there's somewhat 98 megahertz of disparity between them. So that is how you set up the second instance of Cubic. Now, if you're a die-hard Mac user like me, you don't like using terminal. So I took the liberty, and let's close down this second instance here, of taking the command I showed you in terminal, and it's still there somewhere. There it is, open-n, which allows you to open a second instance, and I put that command into AppleScript and stole the Cubic icon and made a little launcher. So if I click on that now, then my second instance will open up as it did before. And what you're seeing here is another example of the API not quite being complete. It sometimes gets confused if you open, close, and then try and open up the same device again. So what we can do is we can go all the way back to the beginning. We'll quit that, and then we'll go to this one, we'll quit this one, and then we'll open it up from the launcher. So here's our first instance. We should get a choice of 4 devices, and indeed we don't. And again, what's happened at this point is the service needs to be restarted, for Cubic to work correctly. That's one of the bugs that still needs to be ironed out of the API. I believe this one may actually be specific to Catalina only. So I'm going to stop the video and we'll go back and we'll start up again using the Cubic launcher. Now if you get stuck with the new API, as happened to us just now, one option is to try unplugging and replugging the device. The other option is to restart the service. And there was an instruction for that showed up in the information window when you installed the API, but I'm sure you've forgotten that. But here it is in terminal. If I go back, I should be able to find it somewhere. Here we go. Using the launchctl command, you can stop the service, which will then automatically restart. So I can issue that command, put in my user password, and then I can go back to my launcher and I can start up Cubic again. And sure enough, now we see all 4 devices we had before. Again, we'll start one up in master mode, and we're on the FM broadcast band again.
Is finally back on the table. Shop Talk Casino and Resort Durant.
So we'll mute that and then we'll hit the launcher again. Remember, if you don't have a launcher icon set up like that, you have to put that command into terminal to do the -n, open -n. And here we see the slave, and we can start that. And it's let's go down to the AM broadcast band again. And here we see KRLD. We'll go to AM mode. And there we have it. Again, I'll mute that. So now we have both instances of Cubic running, one on tuner 1 and one on tuner 2. The other option will be to open up in master mode on tuner 1 and then turn around and run something like dump 1090 for picking up ADSB broadcasts on the second one. Finally, I'm going to demonstrate using CubicSDR to control an RSP remotely on my local network. To do that, I'm going to use a Raspberry Pi configured as a server. So going back to the downloads page at SDRplay.com, I can click on the Raspberry Pi tab and then Raspberry Pi images. And there are 3 images available. The one we're interested in is down the bottom here, headless server v0.1. The advantage of this image is as soon as the Pi is booted, it will start the server without any user intervention, which makes it very useful if you mount the Raspberry Pi out on the antenna mast some way away from your shack. So what we're going to do is we're going to download this and install it according to the instructions here, and we're going to configure it to run the SOAPy server at startup, which will give us the SOAPy remote server that we can use on our local LAN. So having done that, let's open up Cubic. And we can see here that we have an RSP2 connected, and we will just start that up. Now this is connected on my local LAN. The way SOAPy remote works is it opens up different ports each time, so it's not really feasible to get access to this from a wide area network. But within your local area network, it will find devices automatically, and you don't need to know the IP address of the Pi or anything like that. So we can start this up. We'll allow incoming connections, and it looks like we're starting up on 20 meters or so. There's a little bit of activity. Most of this stuff is noise. Let's select upper sideband and see if we can detect any sign of voice that may be coming through. Not seeing very much. This may be some digital stuff going on down here. Yeah. So not too much to listen to down there. Let's just go to the AM broadcast band again, because there's always going to be something on offer down there. And sure enough, here's my friend KRLD again. We'll go to AM. Turn the gain down. It's very easy for these broadcast stations to overload the RSP. So let's put that right on center.
In Bradenton, Florida,
And there we
players are going to get their full 2020 salaries. We're joined by...
So that's how you connect to the SOAPy remote server running remotely on a Pi. As I've shown today, there is the option now to work CubicSDR with the RSPdx. The capabilities with the RSPduo have been considerably expanded, allowing you to use separate tuners by running 2 instances, although as yet there is no native Mac software that will allow you to do diversity tuning, but we hope that one of the third-party authors will come up with something before very long. So hopefully you found this beneficial, and 73.